you can kill someone, and sort of messaging that goes around. It seems to me that we're probably doing things to our collective psychology that we can't even understand right now. And there seems to be very little like people addressing that.
I know. So the thing that's different about this is the public health messaging hasn't just told you that you are at risk, it's told you you are the risk. And what that does is create ill will and blame between people, and it creates a different type of fear. It also allows a deflection away from politicians and policies towards people. Oh, the restrictions haven't been lifted. It's because not enough of you got vaccinated, or because you hugged people, or because there were too many of you in the street on that protest. It's a deflection. I mean, there was one ad that said, "Don't let a coffee cost lives." So this is an ad that is produced by the government, funded by us, the taxpayers, telling us that if you have a coffee, you might kill people. Now, it was never illegal for two friends to meet up and get a takeaway coffee and go for a walk. And for some people, that's been a lifeline. I know that in, those bleak, long winter lockdown months for me, to meet a friend and go for a walk around the local park with a coffee was really, really helpful. So to see an ad telling you that you might kill somebody is not only wildly alarmist, but it's trying to deter you from something which is legal and also normal social human behaviour. And it also then shifts the blame. If you've done this thing, not even the thing that's against the law, but a completely normal human activity that's not against the law, you might kill people. And so there's been a lot of advertising which has created alarm, shifted blame onto people. And there are quite a lot of figures now, I won't have any off the top of my head, I'm afraid, showing that many of the deaths have occurred in care homes and hospitals. And yet, we haven't seen public health messaging about that. And it would be horrific if we were to blame nurses or porters or doctors for people dying whilst being cared for in hospital or care homes. And there are other government policies that you could look at. So, for instance, not sufficient PPE at the beginning. Some people think we should have locked down sooner. I don't, but some people do. But there are policies that would make a great deal more difference than people going for a coffee. There was another ad that showed teenage lads in the park, and the strapline was "COVID kills." Well, COVID hasn't really killed teenage lads, especially when they've met in the park. It's not a disease that poses any serious threat to young people. Though there are a few who've died, but the numbers are tiny. So again, that's trying to create fear in a cohort of people that aren't really at risk. And it also, again, points the finger. It's very easy for older people to look at younger people and say, oh, that they're out in the park, or they're risking our lives, they're endangering us. It just creates blame between people, which I don't think is going to pan out very well in society. I don't think that's the direction we want to be going down, where groups of people are blaming each other for a virus, which is also, influenced by other things, I guess, what viruses do, and, seasonality and, other bigger government policies. Understanding the risk isn't the same as saying it's not real. And there's been a lot of advertising that puts the onus on the person who bent the rules. Now, most people probably bent the rules a little bit at one point or another when it suited them. But also most people will adopt cautious behaviour in times which are dangerous. And I think people can be trusted to do the right things for themselves, their families, and society. And a lot of the approach, the strict laws, the very punitive fines, the public health messaging, have all belied a lack of trust in people.
Yeah, we've been somewhat babied in a way, haven't we?
Mm.
It's like treating us like children is the biggest issue, I feel. It's the advertising as well is really, it really disturbs me in a way sometimes. Like I saw some adverts from the Scottish NHS and just pop up in my Twitter feed, and I had to prove to people that they were not fake because they did not believe what the advert was saying, that it was from the Scottish NHS. There was two ads. There was one, and it was this young girl, or like maybe 20, 25, and the caption, like she was sitting in a park, and the caption read, "I'm still meeting people outside even though I'm double jabbed." And people are just like, hang on, like, why are they trying? I showed it to a couple of people. Like, why are they trying to drum up this fear? And I know you haven't like speculated too much on this, but is your sense just that it makes life easier for them if people are scared for the government?
I think this is quite complicated. I don't have any hard answers. I'm not sitting in the war room meetings. I can't look into the hearts of ministers, so I don't know. I don't wish to speculate about things I don't know about. The book is not conspiracy theory territory, so I'm really not sure. But we know from those Spivey minutes that fear was suggested in order to encourage a level of docility, compliance, adherence with rules. So that's one very obvious and logical motivation. The reason, I mean, you just talked about people not going out despite being double jabbed. I think we're now really seeing the impact of the weaponisation of fear. And it's only just beginning. I think it's going to get worse. You know, there were ONS figures that showed that half of clinically vulnerable people who can stop shielding because they've been offered their vaccination have not stopped shielding. Half of the clinically vulnerable people are still sheltering at home. And that's unnecessary, and you know, that's fine if that's their choice, but I think that betrays a level of unnecessary fear. Also, there have been some quite worrying stats about 1.5 million children potentially needing mental health treatment in the wake of lockdowns. The Telegraph reported just the other day that children as young as 5 are having panic attacks about the idea of meeting their friends. And yet waiting lists on the NHS have probably never been so bad. A waiting list for psychological help are as long as 4 years. Psychiatrists have now identified COVID anxiety syndrome, which is linked to the fear of the virus. So those are some very obvious collateral damages, but also, 1 in 3 adults increased their consumption of alcohol during the first lockdown. I know I did. And there's a 20% increase in opiate addictions. So there's lots of indications that people have been under enormous stress and fear. And it's not necessarily easy to prove causation rather than correlation, or also to extricate what's caused by unnecessarily alarming public health messaging or the 24/7 media doom-mongering, or just the natural human fear of an epidemic, or the impact of lockdowns. You know, there are quite a lot of factors here, but I think it's going to be really important to look at that in some detail, because I don't think we should ever do this to people again. The idea that children as young as 5 are having panic attacks about meeting their friends is horrific.
Yeah, that's horrifying. I think part of the concern, because there isn't, the problem is that it affects everybody, because there's either the people who are scared of the virus and believe that the government actions are necessary, proportionate, and for better or for worse, they think that that's the right thing to do. And then they're scared of COVID and, you know, all the consequences of, you know, long COVID or the Delta variant or some other variant we haven't heard of yet. And then on the other side, there's the people who are scared, like yourself and like me as well, about the scale of the government response and the public's acquiescence to the removal of civil rights and civil liberties, and the prospect that come October or November, December, that Boris Johnson might just say, hey, well, you know, we're going to lock down again. And that's causing, for me, I think, the same amount of stress and anxiety as COVID itself. So it's not just like a one-sided thing. I feel that there's, unless you find some incredibly zen way to be almost oblivious to the entirety of life at the moment, and I know a couple of people like that, they're incredibly good at that. But I'd say most of us are struggling through fear of one thing or another. And it feels really unhealthy.
Yes, exactly. I put this in my book. I think one way or another, a certain amount of fear was unleashed in the air, and you caught it. What you were frightened of might vary, but you caught it. I saw a publican, he's called Adam Brooks, tweet yesterday, "I'm more frightened of the government than I am of COVID." And my goodness, what a terrible situation we're in, that some of us are now more frightened about what the government will do next, whether they're going to let us work, leave our homes, have relationships, etc., than we are of a virus. That's a really, really sad situation to be in. And I think that long-term trust in the government brand and the NHS and public health messaging is going to suffer from this. Also potentially trust in medical treatments. So there's a lot of coercion happening at the moment around the vaccine, which sort of plays into what I've been talking about. Now, there is a chapter in the book about the vaccine, not about the science of it or anything, but about the language of coercion and manipulation that I've noted in relation to encouraging vaccine uptake. But for instance, there have been a couple of TV polls playing on this. GMB put one out on social media that said something like, "Would you uninvite somebody from a dinner party if they weren't vaccinated?" I think the Jeremy Vine programme had one that said, "Do you blame the unvaccinated for the delays to unlocking?" Now, by any yardstick, if you look at promises that were made earlier in the year, that we would cry freedom by Easter from Matt Hancock, or Grant Schnapp said he would join Julia Hartley-Burrow on the barricades if we didn't unlock, and it was based on certain targets. So, at one point it was the over 50s and the clinically vulnerable being vaccinated. Well, we've reached all of those, and also where we are in terms of hospitalisations and deaths is better than the best case modelling that was put out before. But even though we've hit those targets and we're in a good situation, that's still not enough. We're still not unlocking. And this blame game, turning people onto each other. Do you blame others who have chosen not to be vaccinated or can't be vaccinated for the fact we haven't released you yet? And I think that kind of language is worrying, because what it does is other and dehumanise a whole section of people in society who might not want to have the vaccine. They want to wait, so they'd be called hesitant. And we've seen different ways that's tackled. So first of all, there's convenience. You make it convenient to get the vaccine, and there's confidence and complacency. And we've seen them go through that. And now we're entering into another stage where it's about blaming people that don't have it. There was a term that was being used which kind of came up all at once and everyone was using it, and then it just stopped all at once, which was refuse-nick. I think people realised it was just hugely inappropriate. And now it's vaccine refuser or anti-vax or vaccine hesitant. Vaccine hesitant is interesting because it implies there's just a little hump you've got to go over. It implies that the inevitable end result is the same. You're just hesitating, but we'll get you there in the end, dear. So that's something that I see happening at the moment. There was a behavioural psychologist on the news in Canada who talked about this quite openly, actually. They said, we can't unlock yet because if we do, what's the incentive for people to get the vaccination?
CNN said something very similar.
Oh, really? In the US?
Yeah, there was, I can't remember who it was, but I'm pretty sure they were on with Chris Cuomo, and they said, we're losing our opportunity to link vaccination to reopening. Right,
yeah, there we go. Yes, it's about creating pressure for people to follow the desired public health policy. But it's creating pressure in a way which can dehumanise people, create alienation and division in society.
Thanks for making it all the way to the end of the podcast. Don't forget our sponsor, ExpressVPN, and my book, Brexit, The Establishment Civil War, can both be found in the links in the description below. And also, please like, share, and subscribe to this podcast. It's the best way to help us grow. Until next time, thanks for listening.